Buenas noches.
Buenas noches.
So it's December 11th, and I'm at work at one of our pediatric rehab clinics, where I serve as the in-house Spanish interpreter. And this morning, I'm sitting alone, tucked away in our serial casting room, which, when it's not being used for casting, is where I touch down in between appointments, and I do charting, I make phone calls, check emails, etc. But this morning, I've done none of these things. In fact, I've been sitting there for several hours, and my appointments for the morning are all canceling or they're no-showing. And I am glued to my phone, and I'm watching these newsreels come in on my Instagram. I'm getting text messages from family and friends, and I just cannot get myself to focus on work. Because you see, we are 1 week in to Operation Metro Surge. And it feels like I'm standing in front of an ocean, and I'm watching this tidal wave coming, and it's getting bigger and bigger, and I know that it's just gonna come crashing down, and there's nothing I can do to stop it. And I'm sitting there wishing that I could be elsewhere. I wanna be doing something. I wanna be out in the community. I wanna help my community, but I can't. And so I'm trying to shake myself from my inertia, and I tell myself, okay, Patty, like, get a grip. You can't just sit here all morning and be totally unproductive. So I decide to log into our Spanish line call center. So I put on my headphones, I log in, and within a few minutes, the first call comes through. And it's one of our rehab schedulers calling a family to get their child scheduled for a PT evaluation. And the mom says what I've been hearing so many families say, which is, we don't really feel safe right now leaving our home. Is it okay? Can we postpone this? And we say yes. And I add, I am so sorry for what's happening, and I hope you and your family will be safe. Hang up. A few minutes later, a second call comes through. And this call is a nurse who says she's from our hematology oncology clinic. And I say, I don't recognize your voice or your name, but I used to work in our hematology oncology clinic. I was the bilingual patient family advocate. And she says, well, I'm so glad I got you then, because I have this really difficult situation, and I'm having to call this family now for the second time. And she proceeds to explain that they had gotten a call earlier that morning from a school nurse of one of our sickle cell patients. And this patient lives a couple hours from our facility in a small town, and the child had been at school that morning and was having a really hard time staying awake. He kept dozing off, and they were having a hard time arousing him from his sleep. And so the school nurse, knowing his diagnosis, decides that she's going to call the parents to come pick up the child. She thought maybe he is having symptoms of a sickle cell crisis. And so she calls the parents, asks them to come pick him up, and then she called our clinic. And the care team in the clinic decides that they would like to have the nurse call the family and ask them to bring the child to our facility to be evaluated in our emergency department. And so the nurse explains that she had called the family already and she had spoken to Dad. Now Dad tells her, my child was just up really late last night, and he explains that the child wasn't having any of the usual symptoms of a sickle cell crisis, and that they just weren't concerned. And not only that, they were terrified to leave their house. And they said, we don't even have transportation because we are not using our car now. We don't feel safe using our car. So the nurse takes us back to the care team. And the care team decides that no, we think it's really important that the child be seen. But they come up with a plan. And the plan is that they're going to offer to transport the child in an ambulance. And so the nurse explains that now she is calling again, and this time she wants to talk to mom, and she wants to offer this option of coming in an ambulance. So I dial the number, get mom on the line, and I say, I'm the Spanish interpreter, and I have the nurse from the clinic calling again. So the nurse explains that she had taken dad's message to the team, but they would still really like it if the child was seen, and that we were going to offer safe transportation by coming in an ambulance. But mom is still really hesitating, and she begins to say everything that dad had said before. They're not concerned, they don't feel safe, it's too far to go. But the nurse assures her that the ambulance is going to come right to their house. She'll just need to walk from the house to the ambulance, and once they're in our facility, the child will be roomed right away and it'll all be safe. After a little bit of back and forth, mom reluctantly says yes, and the nurse says, okay, we'll call you back when I have an estimated time of arrival. I need to call the county's emergency services. So we hang up with mom, and I tell the nurse, listen, you don't need to call back through the call center. Here's my direct line. I'm going to log out, and I'll wait for your call. So I'm sitting there, and I'm starting to feel really conflicted about the situation. I'm asking myself, why are we asking this family to come all this way with everything that's going on now, especially when the parents aren't really concerned with the child? And I'm thinking, we're always saying parents are the experts of their children. Parents know best, so why aren't we trusting these parents? But on the other hand, I'm thinking, well, you know, the care team knows this child's medical history. They know the family. What do I know? And as I'm pondering this, the phone rings again, and it's the nurse. But she has a bit of panic in her voice, and she says, Patty, we need to call mom right away. They're sending the ambulance, but they also sent the county police. And I'm thinking, oh my God, we just ruined this plan. There's no way this family's gonna wanna come out now. They're gonna be terrified. And I can't get my fingers to dial fast enough to get that mom on the line. I say, it's the Spanish interpreter again. I have the nurse on the line. The nurse explains that the ambulance is on the way, and she says they sent the county police. I'm really sorry. That's just a protocol, and I tried to cancel it, but I don't know if I canceled it in time. Do you see anybody approaching? Can you see, is anybody coming to your house? And mom says she's looking out the window, and she says, yes, I see some people approaching. I can't tell if they're firefighters, if they're police officers, but they're surrounding our house, and there's someone looking in one of our windows. And then I hear mom say, niños, váyanse para su cuarto y cierren la puerta, ya. Kids, go to your room and lock the door now. And then all of a sudden, we hear this bang, 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 bang. Open the door, open the door. Bang, 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 bang. And I nearly fall out of my chair. I pop up. I have my Bluetooth headphones on, so I'm pacing back and forth. My heart's racing, and I don't even wait for that nurse to say anything. I jump in and I say, Señora, por favor, no abra la puerta y pónganos en altavoz. Do not open the door and put us on speakerphone. So mom says she has us on speakerphone, and she's putting the phone up to the screen of a window that's half open. And we're still hearing the bang, 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 open the door, and the nurse jumps in, and she just says, excuse me, can you please identify yourself? I'm the nurse from the facility where the child's being brought to, but can you please identify yourself? And we hear a man's voice say, I'm an EMT, and I'm here to escort them onto the ambulance. So I interpret that for Mom, and Mom says, well, yes, there's an ambulance. They're here. They're in front of our house. What should I do? And this nurse is still unsure of the situation, and she's saying, Mom says the ambulance is in front of the house. Is that true? Yes. And so you're going to escort them onto the ambulance, right? Yes. And so the nurse says, Mom, you can open the door. And I cannot get myself in that moment to say those words in Spanish. Because what I want to say is, go back in the house, go to that room with your kids, lock the door, and don't come out. I'm not trusting this situation at all. I'm thinking this is small town. I'm imagining all these scenarios that we've seen in the news, and I'm thinking this family's going to be dragged out of their home. But I have to force myself to say, Señora, abra la puerta. But I add, please keep us on speakerphone. And so we hear that they come into the house. We hear the mom calling for the child. And I'm just kept saying, Señora, ¿está todo bien? ¿Está usted bien? Are you okay? Is everything okay? And she says, yes. We're walking to the ambulance. And then with this desperation in her voice, she says, but interpreter, could you please ask if my husband can come? I don't want to go without my husband. Can my husband be with us? And so I interpret that, and they say yes. And they will all walk out. They all get in the ambulance. The nurse has a brief exchange with the personnel in the ambulance. And then they say, we're all in the ambulance. We're heading to your facility. And we hang up with Mom. And I'm left on the phone with the nurse, who's thanking me for the help with the call, that her voice is cracking. And she says, but I need to go. I need to tell the care team that they're on their way. And I go, and I sit back down, and I put my head on my desk, and I just start crying. I'm crying for these parents who are terrified. I'm crying for these little kids who are locking themselves in a room in their own house to feel safe. And I'm crying for this nurse who's having to mediate this situation. And I'm crying for myself, for the enormous heartache I feel for my community. So I just let the tears flow. And once I compose myself, I think, I need to call this nurse. I want to find out if she's okay. But I also realize that I'm calling because I'm not okay. I'm feeling alone, and I'm feeling totally untethered, and I need to process what just happened. So I dial her up again, and I say, hey, it's Patty. I just wanted to check in with you again. How are you doing? And she says, I'm fine. You know, I cried when we hung up. I was so afraid for this family. And I said, I know. And then she says that there were some coworkers sitting in the office with her, so she was able to do some debriefing with them. And then she asked me, are you okay? And I say, yeah, I'm okay, but I don't know if I'm really okay. And yet, in those few minutes that I'm on the phone with her, I begin to feel a little less alone. And I'm so grateful for this very brief moment where we can witness with each other what we had just experienced and how hard that felt. And so She thanks me once again, and we say our goodbyes. And I'm sitting there, and I take a deep breath, and I tell myself, you know, Patty, for now, this is the best you can do. And I put my headphones back on, I log in again, and I wait for the next call to come through. Gracias.